This is I Love Black People Radio on HUR Voices, Sirius XM Channel 141. I Love Black People is more than a radio show. I Love Black People is a call from our ancestors to protect us from racial profiling all across the world. Go to iloveblackpeople.com and become a member today. Membership empowers you to live fearlessly and protect Black people globally from racism and xenophobia. Join us today and become a member of our global network with an online global green book with Black-owned and Black-friendly businesses to protect you and your community. Membership is free, and with you, we will become 10 million strong worldwide. I am because we are. Special thanks to AFLAC for supporting I Love Black People Radio.
And welcome to another wonderful episode of I Love Black People. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for being here to share this journey. So much to talk about, so much to do. And we thank, this is the opportunity to do it with you, right? So with that being said, I want to just kind of capture some of the things that have been going on. And I know I've had people reach out and ask questions and kind of want to get an understanding of some of the issues in the world that we're dealing with. As you know, with I Love Black People, it's more than just a radio show. It's more than just an app. It really is a movement of how we can come together and protect each other from racism and Afrophobia. And Afrophobia is defined as the fear as well as the hate of folks who perceive to be of African descent. And one of the things that we notice that when we think about these issues is that, there's a lot of violence going on, and not just involving descendants of African people or Black people, but literally all over the world there's violence. And, what do we do about it? How do we work together? Now, our focus has been narrowly on the 1.5 billion people of African descent, which we think is a very large population that has been for literally hundreds of years not focused on as being needed to be protected, a protected class, or looked at, as a vulnerable population. And we think the time is now to make sure we change that. And we are the ones that will and are, as we do every day as we wake up to build this global safety net. With that being said, that doesn't mean we ignore the things that are going on around us and that these actions aren't somehow connected. The issues of violence, as you know, many that we went to the Ukraine border last year, dealing with the issue of the invasion by Russia into Ukraine. Now, I'm very clear about, the implications of this with NATO, the use of the old Cold War tactics to divide the world. But with that being said, there's a real consequence that was actually happening to members of I Love Black People and their friends who were students and family members, students that were in Ukraine. And not only were they dealing with the issue of violence from the invasion, but the racism in the Ukraine. And many of the young brothers and sisters were fleeing the war and were also fleeing the racism because they were being mistreated. So we were involved in connecting with these students and helping them with safe travel, either back home or to relocate to go to another university. And in so doing, we really leveraged some of the work we had been doing with organizing, utilizing our platform, I Love Black People Safe Spaces. And again, when folks were leaving Ukraine, they were trying to figure out how to get either back home. Many of these countries that our brothers and sisters were from, Cameroon, Zimbabwe, Nigeria, they didn't have any embassies, like in Poland, where we were helping them. So they had to get to Germany and other places. But again, when you're in a vulnerable population that people are advocating for, we need to figure out a way to work together. So often we talk about, the government, what they're doing or what someone else is doing. And again, our context is, yes, we need to hold a whole bunch of people accountable, starting with ourselves. So with that being said, that when we're talking about issues and problems that we see or face, that we need to first look in the mirror and say, okay, what am I going to do? And then what can we do as you start thinking about all the people that you know? And then, of course, hold everyone else accountable. But let it start with you. So our being able to help these young people move from the Ukraine to safe places allowed us to create this database. We leverage our database of safe spaces. Now, again, once they got to Germany or these other places, they didn't know where necessarily to go. And there was a lot of people using Google Forms to help. But that's why we understand it's important that we do things deliberately, just as much as people do deliberate things to hurt us. We got to do deliberate things to help us. So I was giving that the context to kind of give, that we as individuals have things that we can do. And my background, as many of you know, is I'm an engineer. So our co-founder, Christopher Mapendera, and myself, both engineers, we both attended Howard University. So when we look at the world and issues that we face, much of it is through the lens of an engineer trying to solve a problem. And when we look at that, we know that all these issues that are happening are issues that are happening because of human beings. And if that's the case, we probably need some human beings also to actually solve the problem. And, right now we hear about the issues in the Middle East, as well as still in Ukraine. And there's issues going on in Haiti and Dominican Republic and throughout the Caribbean and Central America, and issues facing the DRC that we continually to hear about. And I think one of the things we got to be not careful. I think collaboration, intersectionality, all these words are great. With that being said, you must have your own agenda. And when we talk about our people as a collective, we say agendas, because there's not one Black agenda. We're not monolithic. We're literally so many different people, but we're all connected. And we have a commonality that we need to leverage and use that to give us a ability to magnify our solutions and collectiveness. With that being said, when we're talking about what's happening in different parts of the world, make sure that you're thinking about places in context to your agenda. One of our, I'll just say this out loud, one of my agendas, and this is not to project it on you, is reparations. So again, when I'm thinking about what's happening in the world and who's doing what, I'm always being that as a key agenda, trying to relate that to how do we make sure we repair and make sure people are made whole, especially those of African descent that were enslaved in the United States. And it makes a very, that's very clear to me. So even when I see something else happen, I'm very clear that that's my number one agenda. We talk about the sanctions in Zimbabwe. It's another one on my agenda. I mean, you may not even know where Zimbabwe is in Southern Africa, a landlocked country, about 15 million people. And it's like a little above Botswana, a little above South Africa, south of Zambia. It's west of Malawi, east of Namibia and Angola. But when I say all those things, it may not even be in your top 10 things. But what I try to share with people, when you do hear those things about Zimbabwe, maybe we can collaborate. Now, when you hear the issues of Cuba, and that's another one of my agenda issues, may not be yours, but, what has happened to Cuba is been, even longer than what's happened to Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe's been under sanctions a little over 20 years, 23 years. And Cuba has been under blockade and sanctions for, looks like now 50 years. So those are key issues. Now, you'll see the media, elevating certain issues that are going on right now, like what's happened in Israel with the attacks by Hamas, and what's happened in Gaza with the attacks by the Israelis. But again, I'm not saying that those issues aren't on my agenda, but they're definitely not my number one. And just to be clear, literally the killing going on in the United States by the police and the government of Black people is that's like top 5. Like, that's a very real issue. Like, the government literally being able to be a part of some master plan of sending drugs to America. Like, these are all issues. How does drugs make it to my neighborhood? How did cocaine get to my neighborhood when it's literally grown and only can be grown in certain places? That doesn't mean the lives of Palestinians aren't worth anything. The Palestinian lives and Israeli lives are very important. When we have these conversations, be clear that there's agendas that are being played out. And everyone has one. And that doesn't mean we can't collaborate. That doesn't mean that when something comes up with yours, if your number one might be my number four, we can collaborate. So, one of the things we've been very clear is about, ceasefire. And that's when one of the big hashtags talking about what's going on in the Middle East. But we're clear that the ceasefire needs to go on all over the world. We need a ceasefire in Haiti. We need a ceasefire in the DRC. We need a ceasefire in West Africa. We need a ceasefire in Ethiopia. So it's one of those things where, again, we need to be more engaged in the issues that face the world, because these world issues aren't being made by God, they're being made by men. And I say men, not even in a sexist way, but I know much of this is not being propagated by women, but there are women involved. And so we need everybody involved in the solution. And the more we understand what's happening, we'll see the commonalities of what's happening in the Middle East and Central and West Africa, as well as in the Caribbean and Cuba. And we'll understand that there's a commonality in this that we can collaborate with. Literally, the proliferation of weapons. They don't make weapons in Palestine. They do make weapons in Israel, but they don't make weapons in Central Africa, southern. They make them in South Africa a little bit. They don't make them in Haiti. So they don't make them in many of the Black communities in America. But there's a commonality, these guns that are being proliferated throughout the world. And oftentimes, when we talk about it in the United States, it's talked about as if it's in isolation. There just was another mass killing in Maine, a place where people feel safe. We haven't felt safe in many of the neighborhoods that we've lived in for a long time, not forever, but for a long time. So we have to be able to take these dots and connect them differently. And we can't wait till the corporate media. Like, I think one of the problems we have when we view the world just through the corporate media, these corporations control and own the media. And these corporations have shareholders, excuse me, that actually own weapons companies. I worked, to be candid, I worked for one of those weapons companies. I worked for a company called McDonnell Douglas. And now it's called Boeing. But, my people are originally from St. Louis in the States. So it's one of those things where, McDonnell Douglas is a big place to work. And I got a job working on the Harrier, which is a plane designed by the British, as well as the F-18, which is a plane used by the U.S. Marines and the U.S. Navy. And, this is before the first Persian Gulf War. But it was then I realized, this is not my thing. I can't be a part of a war machine. The talents that I have, I can't use them to help kill people. And, I'm saying that as a context. My father was in the U.S., Air Force. So, again, I had a full, they call it ROTC, ROTC scholarship to Tuskegee, and I didn't take it. I still went to Tuskegee, and Tuskegee I love. But with that being said, that's a real issue about how we use our lives to participate in this war machine. And there are consequences. And if we don't understand what's being done in our names, using our talents, using U.S. tax dollars, we look at that perspective. I stopped working for McDonnell Douglas during I had friends going off and being afraid that they were going to go off in the first Persian Gulf War. I knew that wasn't my direction. I ended up right after I graduated working for a company that made incubators for babies. It's a company called Omida. And it, again, an international company that literally designed incubators to bring children into life and to maintain that life. So again, that was a great experience, but we have to be clear and have an understanding of what's going on in the world. And this is not, again, I get people saying these little catchy words like wokeness and being woke. I hear people talking about where that comes from, but somebody who's been an activist since the 80s, I still remember when people would say, you need to be conscious. And it was a very offensive thing to say to a person, because if you're saying someone needs to be conscious, that means you're saying they're sleepwalking. And that's a negative, it's a personal attack on a human being. So I think sometimes, even in the activist community, we have to connect to human beings where they are and who they are, and not connect to some, ideology that's way off in a spook cloud where people can't really contextually, understand what you're saying. You got to speak to people and understand and listen to them where they are. And I think it doesn't cost anything to be kind to people. So even when we have very serious issues that we see as important on our agendas, when we're communicating those agendas, be mindful. I had a good friend of mine who was talking about the Palestinian issue, and again, I'm supporting all secessions of violence, occupation. All those things have to stop. Now, that's not the first thing I'm thinking about though today. I'm just be 1,000. There's real issues happening in the communities where my family lives too. And I need the folks who are concerned about the Palestinians to be concerned about my community being murdered and killed throughout the United States and other parts of the world. So it's one of those things where it's not like we're competing, but we literally, we respect each other. We should respect and put some kindness on it. Put some respect and kindness on it so that we don't have to end up turning into a disagreement. Again, there are people who are dealing with issues in Southeast Asia, and those issues are number one to them. That doesn't take anything away from the struggles going on for folks in Ukraine or Haiti right now. So again, as we think about all these issues, start off with yourself and start off with a real agenda that you have for yourself and your family. And then leverage that when you hear these things happening, be able to connect. Again, the issues of violence against Black people, making sure they're safe, is central to what we do every day. That's my job. Like, that's my vocation. That's my mission. That's my calling. We're doing that. So we do have to think about, okay, how is this Palestinian thing connected? And it's connected through violence. We're not going to kill our way out of this problem. The problems we face in our communities with guns in the United States, or if they're guns in the Middle East or anywhere else, the people who are benefiting the most from that are the weapons manufacturers. And we don't even know what they look like. Just think about it. When you start thinking about Glock, Smith & Wesson, these different weapons, we don't even know what they look like. The people who are literally making these weapons that are benefiting, like literally, if you look at the stock market right now, you'll see that these weapons platforms are again going up in value. And again, these are the same people who also own the corporate media. So anytime you see a general or somebody, many times they're literally consultants for some of these major companies, and they're on TV talking about, what the solution is. And guess what? If you're a hammer, every problem you look at is going to be a nail. Well, not every problem requires a hammer. Some needs a screwdriver. Some needs a wrench. So there's a lot of things that we sometimes get caught up in because we're looking at corporate media as our lens, as well as the way we're determining our agenda. And we shouldn't allow any corporation to determine what our agenda is. Again, many of us are going through issues with our families. If you're not taking care of your family issues, all this other stuff becomes, moot to a degree. But we also have to be able to connect our family issues to the greater issue. Dealing with, conceal and carry. I'm concealed and carry, but I'm scared. I'm really afraid that somebody might come and try to harm my family. Now, should I be in fear, and should I be able to connect that fear I have about someone trying to harm my family to the greater, greater experience of the world? Yes. These gun manufacturers win on both sides. The person who illegally getting the gun gets the pay money to the gun business. The person like me who's afraid of the person who's got this said gun that's illegal, I'm paying money. Like, on both sides, this fear and this fear mongering and this violence is a windfall for a very few, consistent group of people that we never hold accountable. And again, I used to say it was the military industrial complex, but it's actually the weapons industrial complex. Because when our family members come back from war, they don't get any help from the government or what have. Well, let me say this. The help that they get is not the help they deserve. They deserve more than that. That's why we got so many veterans killing themselves, living home. And this is not a new problem. Ever since there's been a military, there's been a mistreatment of the folks who served. And to play games with patriotism to make this seem like it's about that, when literally the things that they're fighting for have nothing to do with our democracy or the cost of our lives is not, worth some oil. So, it's one of those things where literally we have to be able to discern that and realize it's not anytime you got young people going off to war to serve their country and they got to go to a nonprofit like Wounded Warriors or what have you. Again, it's not against any of these organizations, but these folks didn't go fight out of fun or out of some type of whim. They did it because they believed that they were being called by their country to serve. And when they come back, they need to be taken care of. Like, that just makes sense. And I'm against all these wars. There's no young person that should be sent anywhere. They need to be sent right here to make sure that we keep, them safe. We need our young people so we can solve some of the problems in the world, not create more problems in the world. But what you end up having is many of these young folks come back and they out of their damn minds. They don't know where they are because of all the things that they've been through. And they get thrown away. And they came from many times communities that people didn't think much of anywhere. People talk about Vietnam. They said the state that had the most lives lost per capita was West Virginia. And that's a lot of poor, coal miner, background white folks. So we got to be clear that this stuff is definitely, there's connections to it. But we need to be clear that we need to have an agenda when we talk about it. And know that the corporations that are benefiting from this are the same corporations and stock owners and shareholders that own the media and other instrumentalities that are used to promote, to elevate that war as a solution. And as we see, war is not an answer and violence is not a solution. It just propagates more violence. So I that's why I know even when we talk about white supremacist ideology, any of the issues that we see in this world, we're not going to kill our way through this. Even and this is often talked about the Black Panther. I'd love to get the interview. Huey P. Newton even discussed how they spent so much of their energy on helping and organizing the Black community through their breakfast programs. But what happened was the program that they used to fight and deal with the police brutality showing guns ended up being the highlight. And that was just one particular campaign that they were dealing with in California, dealing with police brutality. But that became the image. And what happened, and again, by any means necessary, I'm fine with that. But literally what they said was that it ended up being used against them, meaning that the use of the gun and showing the gun as somehow being emblematic or a symbol of the Black Panther Party, there was he kind of made the point that it kind of convoluted their message. They would have been rather known for organizing these breakfasts for our young people than to be known for the guns, because they use those images to help destroy the understanding of what the Black Panthers were doing throughout the community. And this is not, I'm not talking about with white folks. I'm talking about this with Black folks, like scaring Black folks that they were afraid, oh, this is going to cause violence. And again, that's, we have to be mindful. We definitely need to protect ourselves. But we don't want our symbol of who we are, or it's easy for the symbols of violence to be used to harm us. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm clear. I'm concealed and carry legally, everything. But that being said, this propagation of weapons has done more to harm our communities than to help them. And again, that doesn't mean I don't think you should protect yourself. I'm just saying that the people who are in control and make these weapons are like the United States' largest export is not movies, iPhones, is military weapons platforms. So when you start realizing that the violence that you're seeing in the world is being, in many instances, paid for by U.S. taxpayer dollars, the blood is on the hands. Like, it's not like indirect, it's very direct. That anytime you see these warships and planes and these bombs being dropped, somebody's paying for those bombs. Even when we talk about the billions of dollars sent to Ukraine, even if it's a loan or what have you, that's billions of U.S. taxpayer dollars being used in wars. And that's not saying what Russia is doing right. It's saying that literally we're probably not going to bomb our way into anything that's going to improve the quality of life of our people, that our people are safe. So again, if you're very interested in solving these problems, make sure you please come out, download the app. We have a Saturday meeting and class we have at 10 a.m. on Eastern Standard Time online. Make sure you check us out and be a part of this solution. At the end of the day, it's like 1,000 ways we can solve this, but try to participate in as many solutions that you have the capacity to be in. So thank you so much. And as I always leave out, I am because we are.
This is I Love Black People Radio on HUR Voices, Sirius XM Channel 141. I Love Black People is more than a radio show. I Love Black People is a call from our ancestors to protect us from racial profiling all across the world. Go to iloveblackpeople.com and become a member today. Membership empowers you to live fearlessly and protect Black people globally from racism and xenophobia. Join us today and become a member of our global network with an online global green book with Black-owned and Black-friendly businesses to protect you and your community. Membership is free, and with you, we will become 10 million strong worldwide. I am because we are. Special thanks to AFLAC for supporting I Love Black People Radio.